Hello everyone and welcome to Civic Platform. This is your host Zuher Almusre. Today in the studio I have Rita Chahal, and she's one of the earliest families arriving to Canada, and she's a very good example for a success person here in Winnipeg. Rita, welcome to Civic Platform.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Please, let's begin and introduce yourself. Who are you and what are you doing?
Well, I'm Rita Chahal. I've been living in Manitoba for almost 45 years now. As you said, we're one of the earliest arrivals in Canada. We came in 1966. My parents arrived in December 1966 when I was very little. And we were the second family of Indian origin, of color actually, to arrive in Prince Edward Island. So our early humble beginnings were in Prince Edward Island, where I grew up, went to school, went to university, and then when I got married, moved to Manitoba, and I've been here since then. I've raised a family. I've had a great career, and Manitoba has been a great place to build a life.
So if we start to talk about the journey, once you arrive to Canada and you decide to move to Manitoba and you settle here in Winnipeg, how it looks like, what's the most challenging for you when you are coming to a new country?
Yeah. Well, let me go back to when we first arrived in Canada. When we arrived in Prince Edward Island, we actually arrived in Halifax at Pier 21. Back in the 60s, everyone that was coming to the East Coast had to go through an immigration process where you went to Pier 21 and your papers and everything were processed at that point. And then you went on to wherever you were planning to get settled. So our family spent a week or so just before Christmas at Pier 21. And then we went, my father then, for another time, we'll share that story. We ended up going to Prince Edward Island, moving there. The woman who had sponsored us, my dad, lived in Prince Edward Island. So we went there for Christmas, and then very fortunate. My father was well educated. He was one of India's top premier athletes, elite athletes, and so he had very good qualifications when he came, and so he was very successful in those early days to get 5 job offers. You'd never hear of that nowadays, or in recent years, as a teacher. So he got a job, and we accepted one in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, and we got settled there. Now, of course, having family, having someone there to help us, support us, it was a lot of it put through the church. There was, and we spoke English well, because I came from a background where I went to school in India where English was the primary language. So that was very helpful. And so that meant that we were able to get a little bit easier in settlement into schools. My father being a teacher, all of those aspects helped. But there were also challenges, right? And so the challenges were no one else from our community, from Indian community, from no one else who could speak the language. Because we spoke English so well before we came here, my parents were really concerned that we might forget Hindi and Punjabi. So they made a real effort to make sure that they continued speaking the language at home. So we were able to maintain that. The other struggle was no food, the foods, right? The kind of foods that you had to that were available. So it ended up, my father ended up starting his own little grocery store in our basement because he started importing food. So those were stuff. And then eventually my father did sponsor a number of families. That came, and so there was about 5 or 6 families, and we all supported each other, and then they sponsored other families, and so the population of within Prince Edward Island grew quite a bit. So now, from 56 years ago to now, there's about maybe 500 families that have settled as a result of that first sponsorship, that us coming to Canada, and they are now settled in Canada, U.S., and even in Europe as part of the extended family. So those are some of the challenges and successes, but yes, there were challenges. You know, my dad had to learn to drive. We had to learn how to figure out navigate what the basic society expectations. But having a language and having a place of faith was very helpful. Coming to Manitoba, of course, when I got married, the biggest challenge here was the cold weather. So adapting to that was definitely a big, took me about 3 years. I had, you know, had a very good academic career up to that point. And then, you know, when we arrived here, I had to look for work. And so I did find that challenging because I had not experienced any form of racism, or at least had ignored it, and at least didn't pay attention to that when in the East Coast. But when I did come here, when I would apply for jobs, or even when looking for apartments, there were times when the doors were shut but I'm really glad to know now that so much has changed in Manitoba. Manitoba is such a diverse province and a Winnipeg community that you know, people from all around the world are welcome. And then eventually, as my career went on, I became the executive director of an organization that welcomed newcomers from around the world. So that was a bit, you know, coming full circle. So yes, there's been challenges, but also some great opportunities that have allowed me to call both Manitoba and Canada my home.
So there is a fact here in Canada, we didn't find it in other countries. When the immigration or the immigrant come to Canada, they face a lot of challenge. They have a difficulty time, but they don't have the idea to come back to their home. So this story maybe in the Middle East, like when some people leave their countries to find a job contract in another country, they go, and when it's finished, they come back home. But this is not the things what happen here in Canada. They come and stay, and they bring more families to have a big community.
Yes.
So this is a really interesting. Why the people, when they are coming to Canada, they stay?
Well, I have to say Canada, even though there are challenges when you first arrive, it is one of the most welcoming countries in the world. That's from, you know, a personal perspective. There is the people of Canada make you feel welcome. We certainly felt that when we first arrived in Prince Edward Island. The church that we went to was a very strong part of that welcoming community, becoming part of that the congregation, and being able to engage in community work was very important, and was very integral. It was very a strong part of a successful settlement. And I think newcomers coming today will find that if you have a good support system that allows you to integrate well into the community. The other thing that in my life that I learned, and especially from my parents, is the importance of giving back. So, you know, once you become, start counting your blessings and being grateful for what you have, even though you've left a whole lot behind. We were very homesick. My mother had a really difficult time, even though she didn't speak English at the time. My father and the children, we all spoke English, but my mother didn't. So she had a difficult time. There was a loss of her father and loss of her brother within a year that she arrived. So there was all those challenges. So there was all those, you know, things that impact your mind and your soul and your heart. But because there was other support systems in place, it allowed us to continue moving forward. We also, as a family, stayed very close to each other, continued to support, making sure that my parents always made sure that they did the best that they could, working hard and teaching us the importance of feeling gratitude for what we had, but also remembering that you have to give back. So early in our growing up and going into school, I became very involved in school activities, becoming, being part of, taking leadership roles, being a president of Red Cross Society or student council and things like that. That it really, that is what built where I am today, because it allowed me to think, always continue giving back.
Mm-hmm. So Canada is a land for immigrant land. Everyone here, like most of us, we came originally like immigrants from other countries. Yeah. So the immigration system before, it was harder for when you came or today. Today we have like many organizations welcoming
yes.
the immigrants, yeah. But still they're suffering.
Yeah.
So compare that two period. Which one you see
well,
it like more easier?
I guess there's the benefits and challenges of both. Back in the 60s and when, first of all, there were no settlement agencies when we arrived in the 60s. Mm-hmm. So everything we had to really find our own way, and we had to find support systems within the communities that we were living in. But what that allowed us to do is people like my parents, and then later on myself as I grew and started working, allowed us to see where the gaps were. What were some of the things that people needed? They needed language. They needed to make sure that there was availability of foods, because those are the things that the familiarity that you miss, and then having those allows you to integrate into a community much better. Today you can go to any community and you'll find restaurants of different ethnicity. You'll find grocery stores. You'll find other stores, whether it's clothing or so that has evolved. And a part of that evolved because those early arrivals back in the 50s, 60s, even 40s, they saw the gaps. And then they started building businesses, or they started building services, or they started helping others. And so what my parents did, and what many others who came in at that time, really were providing settlement services for other people that they sponsored. And so over time it grew, and our governments recognized the importance of that. And both federally and provincially, and therefore that's why we have I believe, in my opinion, we have a very good settlement system in Canada. Yes, there's lots of areas that we can perhaps improve on, but overall the settlement sector in our country is very strong and perhaps one of the best.
So let's move on about your career. So many people, when they are coming from different countries, they come with a high level of education. They already have their skills and experience, mm-hmm. But when they are here in Canada, they find that's too much challenging to fit in mm-hmm. some jobs like what they know before.
Exactly.
What's your...
my thoughts on that? You're right, absolutely. As the world is getting smaller, with more globalization, people are moving from one country to another. And in Canada, we've certainly experienced that with people with highly educated doctors, teachers, lawyers, engineers who come here cannot get into their profession. Part of the reason, and I've been involved in a lot of work around credential recognition. I've certainly lobbied for the importance of recognizing foreign trained professionals. I've been on a number of committees. I've made presentations to government groups, and I've been very involved in that process. So what I see is that it's not necessarily an intention to keep people out purposely. What happens is that you have to ensure that the laws and policies and procedures of a country, which are really meant to safeguard the citizens, you and I, and the newcomers, are being met. So things have improved. We've come a long way. When there were many closed doors, things have now opened up. It's getting easier. Foreign credential recognition there's still challenges, but it is being recognized. But it is to ensure that the legislation and the knowledge and the skills, the technical skills, are in line with what the laws of the country are and what the regulations within a profession. So I think that's what it, and it has to be very much an opportunity to continue dialogue, to continue emphasizing that people that are foreign trained are bringing great skills. I think more and more people are recognizing that. So I have in the time that I've been in my professional career certainly seen major steps being taken in those areas. Yes, we do still have a long way to go, but there have been some legislative changes that have been made in various professions.
So do you advise the people today to go and equalize their certificate, to start volunteering, to have this Canadian experience, for example, just to make their life more easier and not waste the time and lose their certificates from like a different country?
I think there's a variety of ways in which you can keep your skills up. Certainly, don't give up. You know, if whatever your profession is and wherever you want to be, if that's a dream you have, keep working towards it. Yes, you might find roadblocks, but you have to learn to figure out how to deal with those. So, volunteering is a great way to get experience. But it's also a great way to keep you busy and engaged, and to really, you know, be able to give it forward. So you're not wasting your time just sitting home watching television all the time, or being sad. You're engaged. You're in with it, and you never know. You never know when a door might open. You never know who you might meet. You never know when something might happen where you might say, oh, well, maybe this is something else that I can continue doing. So I never close any doors. I've always volunteered. I always encourage anyone that I know, the work that I've done, volunteering has been a big part of that advice. But yes, don't give up on your hopes. You know, and also don't be afraid to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. You shouldn't feel like, oh my God, I'm asking for help. That means then people must think that I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know anything. Just no, ask for help. It's okay. People are more than willing to help, and so those are some of the things that have worked for me.
When I meet my community, the Arabic community or other communities, I hear like many of stories. Some of them, they have a success journey like yours, but the others, they suffering from like a mental health. They don't find like a job. They have like an idea. We was like in very high position back home. We need something to continue here, like similar. So what's your message for these people?
Well, first of all, my message is absolutely many people experience that. In fact, most people experience that. You know, in life, when you moving to a new country is a huge risk, and we need to give ourselves so much credit for taking that leap and saying, leaving everything behind, leaving your property, leaving your family, leaving your career, and having that courage to take such a big risk. So first of all, be very proud of yourself that you made that choice, and for yourself and for your family. Secondly, you know, when when you end something and you go towards a new beginning, there are often two or three stages in it. The ending has to finish off. You have to do certain things to close that off. Then you go through a period of a bit of uncertainty, and which would include dealing with stress and mental health and some of the disappointments that you might be saying, oh my God, what did I leave behind? I wish I could go back. But then there's always the opportunity for the new beginnings. So plan for those new beginnings. You did it here, you did it once, you can do it again. So I always believe positive thinking, make sure that you move forward. You know, I believe that our life is our Maker has a plan for us. That's a personal belief. I'm not sure if everyone would agree with me, and I always try to find the best in every situation that we have, and I would say that people could do that, and also, you know, be grateful for what the things that you do have. There are so many other people that are worse off than you. But again, also the same message, don't be afraid to ask for help. And especially you talked about mental health. In our communities, mental health is often seen as a very stigmatized. It's seen as a sign of weakness. You don't want to talk about it. I mean, it's happened in my family, so it's, you know, I'm quite aware of it. And now I work in a sector as the executive director of a mental health organization, and I still continue to see mainstream and ethnical where mental health is still very stigmatized. But what the pandemic has done is allowed us to, the silver lining in that has been that we are having a conversations about mental health, the importance of physical, but also mental health. And so when newcomers come, they often don't want to share their struggle. They don't want to talk about their sadness. They often go through a period of euphoria when they first come to a new country and trying to get settled and just want to get things, and then they go through a period of lull. Well, oh my goodness, the reality is hitting in. And then eventually they will come out of it. But there is no shame in asking for help. That would be my message.
When you start talking about your story and you said, we hear some verbally abuse from the people, some judging about our colors, about our accent, but you said we ignore it. How that method will help the newcomer?
Maybe ignore. That's not exactly what I meant to suggest. I just, when I experienced some of that, I just chose to focus on myself. I am who I am, and this is the color of my skin, and this is where I came from, and this is how I'm going to do things. I focused on myself, of what I can do, rather than somebody else telling me, "Oh, you're not welcome here." Hey, I'm just as good as you. So it was really my own taking control of myself. And so, no, I wouldn't say ignore it. I think if you see racism, and if you see it, you should call it out. And if you see somebody else hurting or bullying somebody, or and whether it's in your workplace or whether it's on the street, absolutely, you should make don't ignore it. Don't raise your voice. Use your voice to bring attention to that. If it means, going as far up, if somebody has been mistreated, talk about it in your community, talk about it in your family, talk to your children that you should not tolerate these things. I don't even like the word tolerant, actually. I prefer to use the term acceptance. You either accept someone or you don't. You should never tolerate somebody. So, because tolerate means just you're putting up with them. So I prefer not to, I very seldom use that that term. But I think you have to really believe in yourself. And so that doesn't mean that you ignore what's happening around you, but you have to keep moving forward with what you bring to the table, what you bring to your community, what you bring to your country, what you bring to your job, and do the very best that you can.
You got many rewards here in Canada, and that's something we're proud of, as a communities. We have a great examples, you can be one of these people who get that rewards. So tell me about yours.
Oh, well, I've been very humbled in recent times. I've received, just in the last year and a half or so, received community recognition. In 2021, I was recognized as a Manitoba 150 women trailblazers, which was, quite a prestigious award given out to Manitoba women who have contributed to the social and economic and cultural fabric of our province. And so I was very humbled by that. There's only 150 women in the entire province that have received that. So to be one of those recipients, along with people like Nellie McClung and some senators and some ordinary everyday women who have contributed to the building of our community, was very humbling. Then in summer of 2022, I was recognized as one of the top 25 immigrants in Canada. And that was just really heartwarming. I never expected that. But I gave both, I dedicated both those awards to my parents, especially my father, who's no longer with us, for having taught us the importance of giving back to community. And then just recently, for my work in community, I was the recipient of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Award. So those are three, I guess, more public awards that I've been given. I've also been very blessed and humbled, and have had the opportunity to receive other recognition at various community levels, for United Way and things like that. So. And I share those with my community. I share that with my family. I dedicate them to my parents.
How that will be a good reflect or positive reflect when in our communities we find someone's success. So that's an example for us to follow, and there is nothing impossible. If we work hard, and today, like one day, we will get our rewards too. Yes. So how that will be a good example for our community?
First of all, the fact that you really should be giving back to the community because you want to. It has to come from the heart. You have to be passionate about what you're engaged in on a volunteer capacity. I've done volunteer work on a variety of areas, both from being in a boardroom and being on a board and being on national committees and things like that, to baking, or to being on a church or a daycare, working with parent rep. So volunteer is whatever you're volunteering at, be the best you can be. Give it your best. I've done bake sales. I've done presentations. So again, there's a whole range of things that you can be involved in. I think you do it not necessarily to get accolades. You do it because you want to give back. You're giving back to the community that gives you so much. So I would hope that others that are listening, that would be something. And it's something that I've tried to instill in my children, that be very proud of your bicultural heritage. Don't forget where you came from and where your parents came from. Be grounded in who you are today. Be proud of your bicultural. If my children were all born here, be very proud that you're a Canadian citizen. But also plan for tomorrow. Where do you want to be? How are you going to give back? So I now see my children getting more and more involved in community work, and volunteering and doing those kinds of things, and taking on leadership roles.
So as a mother, when you mention your kids, to raise our kids here in Winnipeg, it's a little bit challenging because it's a little bit different about how we raised in our back home. Mm-hmm. What's your tips or advices to the Indian women or any immigrant women to be careful with raising their kids here in Winnipeg?
Okay. First of all, I have to say I'm very blessed with incredible children who have honored me and my husband and in the way we raised them by following some of the parenting that we did, and all three of them are very successful. So I'm happy to say that. I'm now blessed with 4 grandchildren who are now the new love of my life. My advice, take the best of both worlds. There is so much that you bring with you. Don't forget the values that you bring with you. I mean, my mother, she, when we were growing up, it was often the values of what her mother taught her, and what those were instilled in us. And in some small way, we continue to give those to our children. But I was also open to how the kids needed to adapt in the environment that they were in, the schools, the sports, the cultural activities. You don't close your eyes to that. There's a social fabric as well, about relationships and about things like, going to school dances or dating. So find out about what that means. But always, I think what I've done, my husband and I have done, is try to teach our children to do the right thing. If it feels right in your heart, then do it. If it doesn't feel right, then you want to think about it. I've been very blessed that we haven't had issues with our kids, no major issues, I should say. We all have had challenges with our children. I'm not saying that we were perfect parents or that my children, as much as I like to think that they're perfect, there were of course growing pains as in any family, and we dealt with them. We dealt with them in informed ways, without any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Too much disruption.
Yeah. So to be a success person, it's the people, when you reach your high level, they look and they see your brightness and they see your success. But there is like a very huge part from your story, it's hidden. There is like a pain and tears and hard work. So how we can motivate ourselves when we are very down sometimes, to encourage ourselves to continue and work hard to reach our goals?
Very good question, and I'm not sure I have all the answers, with the full answer for that. First of all, I think the fact that you've said that we go through different phases in our life, right? We go through different areas of sadness and happiness and elation. And in life, in general, when you look at one's mental health and mental well-being, we tend to be on a continuum. You're not always completely well, and you're not always completely ill, right? So you always kind of go on this continuum. I think the challenge becomes is when you start to move towards that illness side, you want to take steps to start bringing you back to that wellness side. So I don't have a prop here to show you, but if you really imagine a line, here's illness and here's wellness. And somewhere, most people fit on there somewhere. Sometimes they might be closer to this, sometimes they might be closer to this, and most of us do stay in the middle. I think it's important to recognize that your mental health, your emotional and understanding of who you are, is just as important as physical well-being. We tend to just focus a lot on physical, and we forget the mental health piece. So I think that's a start. I think it's important to take care of things for yourself. When you say self-care, we often say, oh, well, go to self-care. Self-care is not just about having candles and bubble baths, right? We tend to think that. It's really about mindful thinking. It's about having gratitude. It's being aware of where you are, what do you need. It's being involved in exercise and making sure you have a good diet, making sure you go for walks, making sure that you have a social network and a support system. Those are all part of good mental well-being, mental health. So if you start to see one part missing, try to make sure. And the other thing, again, I've said this, repeat it again, that don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're really falling and you're not able to get out, if your symptoms or if your sadness continues, seek professional help. It's all right. You need it. And if it means medication, if it means hospitalization, if it means getting counseling, absolutely get it. Don't put it under the rug, and don't hide it. Just because you think somebody's going to say, oh, well, this person is weak, or whatever stereotype they might put on it. Do not be afraid to ask for help when it comes to your mental well-being.
Rita, we reached the end of our episode. I want to give you the mic for like a last word to wrap up everything. If I forget to ask you any question and you want to say something, please, you can do it now.
Oh, well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to have this lovely conversation. I wasn't quite sure what we were going to talk about, but it's certainly gone in a direction that I think we've had some good opportunity for me to share about my background and what the journey that I've done. I think what I'd like to remind everyone is that we live in one of the best countries in the world, Canada. I go home to India often when I can to visit, but I look forward to coming back. And so I haven't forgotten my past. I absolutely am grounded with where I am today, and I always plan for the future. I think my other message is that take care of your mental well-being as much as your physical well-being, because if you don't have good mental health, and you don't, your physical health is going to suffer as well. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And the third thing I would say is to give back to our community. I've had a very successful career. I worked in a lot of organizations across the country as well that have given me the opportunity to meet with great Canadians, ordinary everyday citizens, to politicians and prime ministers who I've had to deal with. So I'm very blessed, and just keep your dreams alive. Get to where you want to be.
Rita Chahal, thank you very much for being with me today in Civic Platform.
My pleasure.
So thank you everyone for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and you get helpful information from our guest. Thank you again. If you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe, and wait for a new episode from Civic Platform.